Good afternoon and welcome back to the Weekly Wellness Update. I'm your host, Gabe Osterhout. Thank you for joining us. For those of you who haven't heard the show before, we like to take a look at some of the health-related issues going on, not only on campus, but in the community. And October is actually a really big month for health-related items. October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and you'll hear more about that in a couple of weeks. But it's also Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and that's what we're going to focus on today. I'd like to thank my guest, Haley Murphy. She is from Crime Victims Assistance Center, also the campus coordinator for Enough is Enough. So, Haley, thank you so much for joining us. First off, last week, I don't know if anyone noticed, but the library tower was turned purple in honor of Domestic Violence Awareness Month. First off, Haley, if you could just talk a little bit about domestic violence. I think people have an idea of domestic violence. They think of a husband or a boyfriend beating up his girlfriend or wife, but it's more than that.
Yeah, definitely. So the term domestic violence, or interchangeable with dating violence or relationship abuse, it's a cycle or pattern of behaviors that are designed to establish, maintain, and enforce control over another person. That's like the big thing there. But it's just one person against another. So it could be, doesn't matter their race, their religion. Domestic violence doesn't discriminate. It's across all socioeconomic statuses, in all types of relationships. So homosexual, heterosexual, all the different kinds of relationships that you can think of. It becomes abusive when there's power being put on another person within that dynamic.
And I think it's important that it doesn't discriminate. We may have an idea of what domestic violence is, but it could be a woman taking control over the guy that she's dating or living with. And it doesn't have to be couples. It could be roommates. It could be anything.
Definitely, definitely. Typically, when you think of domestic violence, and I think of how it's been portrayed in the past, you think of males as the perpetrator and females as the victim. However, we know that this is not true. Just from the work that I do at my agency, wives and girlfriends, they can definitely exhibit that control of abusive behavior over their male counterparts. And it probably happens more than we think. I think a lot of that comes from men don't really reach out for help when they need it too. So even just reporting wise, women vastly more come forward with the domestic violence that they're experiencing.
And I think nowadays there's more of a push to recognize domestic violence and bring it to the forefront. Just in the last couple of years, we've seen professional sports leagues, the NFL, earlier this year, Ezekiel Elliott of the Cowboys. He was suspended and then revoked, and that suspension is still ongoing. The Giants kicker, Josh Brown, he had a domestic violence incident. Johnny Manziel, Ray Rice, I think, of the Baltimore Ravens, is the one that really brought it to the forefront. And it was the idea that, yes, there was domestic violence, but I think it's because we saw it. They had the video of him and his fiancée in the elevator. How much of a good thing is this that, these big professional sports organizations are now really paying attention and bringing this issue to the forefront?
Yeah, I think I would definitely say that it's a good thing, even a great thing, honestly. Before it was in the news, quite literally and figuratively, domestic violence was behind closed doors. People thought of, if that's happening, that's none of my business. That's, in their domestic setting. But now that these organizations, these big sports organizations are coming forward and condemning this behavior and putting some punishment on these guys who are doing this, it's definitely just coming to the attention of the world that it's happening and happening to, again, people who they're affluent. They have lots of money, and it's still happening there too. So it changes how people view it in general. And I also think it's a great message coming from these specific organizations. When we think of these sports world, they're very male dominated. So for them to come forward with these messages, I think is really strong and has a really powerful message behind it.
And do you think it's really powerful to the victims as well? A lot of times we hear that victims of domestic violence don't necessarily want to speak up because they themselves feel like they've done something wrong. So, to see this big push, do you think that's going to help more victims speak out?
I think yes and no, honestly, I'm going to say, because just in general, people are talking about it. People are realizing that they're going to pay attention to it and that there's going to be more resources for it. However, coming forward is such a personal decision for a victim, too. It's important to mention that when someone comes forward with domestic violence, reaches out for help, or even takes an opportunity to leave their abuser, that increases the risk of violence very high. So it's a great thing for them to reach out to help, but they also have to think of their own safety in that situation too. But I think the more we talk about it, the more resources are going to be available and more people are going to feel safe doing that.
And it seems like when a victim does speak up, a lot of people will say, well, this has happened to you before. Why don't you just leave them? But it's not that easy, is it?
No, it's really, really not. Victim blaming comes in all sorts of forms. And I think people, the average person who hasn't experienced abuse is going to say, it's plain and simple. You're getting hurt. Why not leave the situation? But, in relationships, in any relationships, there's so many dynamics that go into it. When you start a relationship, love is a piece of that and commitment. And it's very hard for people to just let that go, no matter what they're feeling on the back end. Mm-hmm. But also, as that relationship progresses, there could be children in the mix, which is a big thing for leaving. Safety and fear. If I try to leave, is he going to hunt me down? Is he going to get his friends to come and verbally or emotionally, attack me? And also like values that people hold too. In some cultures or even just family systems, divorce is just not a thing. Leaving your partner is not a thing. So it's not even an option for some people. So it's easy for the average person to say, why won't they just leave? I can't believe they're going through that. But when you're in that situation, it's really, really difficult and very different and something you have to really think about and plan for.
And I think a lot of times when people think domestic violence, they think this is a problem with adults. This is something that's going to happen to people who are married or engaged. But really, and we've seen some cases in the news, Yeardley Love, the lacrosse player from Virginia, that was a domestic violence. There was a basketball player at Geneseo. That was domestic violence. So these things actually do happen on college campuses.
Definitely. It happens to everyone, and it can happen at any stage of a relationship. I'll say that first. But also, I think that the campus environment, like even the physical setting of a campus environment, it creates more opportunities to have control over another person. Dorm life is very specified. You have to, you get access to a dorm and you can go in there. So if someone has access to someone's dorm, they're going to be able to access that whenever they want. Also, same class schedules from week to week. If people know that they're going to this one class, they're going to have access to them in that at that time, week after week. So it's very hard to escape someone who may be abusing another person. And because it hasn't been talked about, I think that it just happens more on college campuses and no one realizes it.
And October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month.
Yes.
And trying to bring the awareness that it is a problem. It's not just something that is behind closed doors, but it really is more of a community problem. Talk a little bit about the importance of this month and kind of some of the messages. Someone who works for crime victims and Enough is Enough, what are some of the messages we should take out of this month?
Yeah, there's so many, but I think, at the beginning of the month, last Friday, my agency had an event downtown called Paint the Town Purple. And really, it was a positive event about awareness for domestic violence. And you don't think that those two things fit. But I think to solve any problem, people really need to understand it and understand how often it's happening. I think, the number one cause of injury that women go to the ER for is domestic violence. And you don't realize that. But knowing that fact alone makes people kind of clue in like, oh, this is actually a big issue in our society and we need to give attention to it. And from that, also creating spaces and supportive environments where victims feel like they can come forward and feel supported and feel safe so that people know about the resources that are available for them in their community. All those things are really going to help a victim feel ready to leave and to take those steps to be safe and to, leave their abuser.
Paint the Town Purple.
Yes.
We turned the library tower light purple. Mm-hmm. Why purple?
So, in the United States military, actually, the Purple Heart is presented to those who have been wounded while serving. So, the National Domestic Violence Center, they kind of took that message and survivors of domestic violence who may also be wounded both physically and emotionally, the color is meant to be a symbol of peace, courage, survival, honor, and a dedication to ending violence. So it has a nice little leeway into that.
And it's something I just thought of, and the other problem I think with domestic violence is when people think that, they think bruises, they think physical marks, but it can also be really emotional too.
Yeah, there's so many different types of ways to again, put control over another person. Of course, we think of physical abuse, but you have to also remember verbal abuse, emotional abuse, financial abuse is a big one that people forget about, and then sexual abuse too. Sexual assault is a huge piece of domestic violence, and sometimes they look like two separate issues, but really it is under the same umbrella.
Coming up later this month, Crime Victims Assistance Center, New York State. I know we here on campus are passing around the message. October 19th, Wear Purple Day. Talk a little bit about that event.
Yes. So a week from today, next Thursday, is New York State Wear Purple Day. The message they're saying is to shine the light on domestic violence. So the library was shining purple. There are some buildings downtown that are also shining purple. And we're really trying to just show a unified stance through New York State that, we support survivors and that there needs to be awareness to this issue. The Office of Domestic Violence in New York State is asking people to wear their purple, put it on social media, hashtag shine the light. They have a big campaign that they'll share it and repost and all that stuff. So we'd love to see, the BU community getting involved.
And we talked about, domestic violence being a thing on college campuses. You work with Enough is Enough.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that group.
Okay, so Enough is Enough is a program and actually an educational bill that was signed into law the summer of 2015, so 2 summers ago. But the bill has lots of different components. First, it designated a uniform definition of affirmative consent across all schools. SUNY schools already had that, but this brings in the private schools as well through New York State, and also a statewide amnesty policy. So if drinking or drugs may be part of interpersonal violence, there won't be charges against the victim for those, which is great. Makes people feel more comfortable going forward. But it also expanded resources to students. So it contacted agencies, or it provided funding for agencies like Crime Victims Assistance Center all throughout the state to connect with the schools that are in their counties. So hopefully every school in New York State has a local rape crisis counseling system that they're working with. So it's just another option for students to reach out for. And then lastly, which is pretty cool, it created a unit within the New York State Police that has a specialized unit for student victims of interpersonal violence. So we work closely with them as well.
So we've talked about this, and we're not naive to think that domestic violence may never happen here on campus. So if somebody feels that they are a victim of domestic violence on campus, what can they do?
So, with all clients that we work for, the first things that we like to make sure in place are, physical well-being. Are there any medical needs that you need to take care of? And then secondly, safety. Are you safe in the moment? Are you going to be safe when you walk out the door? Are you going to be safe when you go back to your dorm rooms? Those are all things that we really like to, the number 1 and 2 things that we like to clue in on. But then this next thing would be to know your resources. Like I mentioned before, it's really hard for a victim to reach out because it could, in some instances, put more risk on them. But knowing your resources is going to be very helpful for when you are ready to reach out, when you feel like the risk is at a low point or you are just ready to make that decision. It's really difficult to be a victim and to, be brave enough to reach out because you're in a relationship that there is a sense of love and caring for, but you're also being hurt. So there's a huge dynamic there. And we always make sure that our clients, they are weighing the safety that they have when they take any decision. What I like to say is that for friends who may know that their friend is in a relationship like this, is to, check in with them, say like, hey, I know something is going on. I'm going to support you no matter what. I think that's a really strong message that can help someone come forward, because what abusers like to do is isolate them from any support systems that they have. So if you make an effort for your friend that you are going to be there for them unwaveringly, it's really going to help them in the long run for when they're ready to come forward.
And I think along the lines of support is being there for them, not trying to force them into getting the help that, an outsider says, you need help, you should do this. The support should be different than that.
Definitely. So when you're in a relationship like this, power and decisions are consistently being taken from you. You don't have control over that relationship. So putting that control back in that survivor's hands is the key. You want them to make the decisions about what feels right to them, what they feel like they can do, and what's going to keep them safe. You can't tell them to do something, especially if it's going to put them at risk. That's a dangerous situation. You just want to show that you are always going to be there for them, that you're going to know what to do when it's time to make steps to get out of that relationship, and that you're not going to forget about them, and you're going to be there no matter what. It's a really strong message.
Now, there are things, if somebody on campus is, dealing with this situation, there are things that the campus can do and the care team can do to kind of help out in this situation.
Yeah, definitely. The case managers here are really, really great. Doris Chung from IVP, Interpersonal Violence Prevention, she is the advocate here for instances of interpersonal violence, and she will make plans and help you make sure that you're safe and that you are have all the resources available to you. Make sure that you are can get into counseling and connect with my agency and can really feel like you can still be a student and leave that relationship or do whatever you need to do to keep yourself safe and to strive again.
And some of those things could be finding you a different place on campus to live.
Yes.
Helping you rearrange your class schedule because the violence may have stopped, but sometimes for these victims, just seeing that person is enough to trigger something. So, being able to get out of a class or whatever, how important is that?
It's really important. They do their best to make every accommodation available to them so that their education is still what they are learning here and they don't have to take a semester off. Everyone on campus is here for an education, and they do everything that they can to make sure that that's still achievable. So they work really closely with Residence Life to find a different dorm room that's going to keep you safe. They change classes for you if your abuser's in that class, or they talk to the professor about maybe giving you some different accommodations within your class. They've really do everything in their power to make it work.
And as somebody who's kind of read a little bit about this, sometimes just seeing that person months later is enough. So, we talk about changing classes. Well, maybe that person, their abuser isn't in that class, but, they know that walking to their class, they're going to pass them.
Definitely. It's important, when anyone who goes through interpersonal violence, there's a sense of trauma. And even, low trauma can have PTSD reactions later. It can send you it will feel as if that trauma is occurring again if there are, reactions to it. So safety planning is what would come in that moment to make sure that when you're on campus, no matter where you're going, that you have someone you can reach out to, that you have a support system that you can call or text to make sure that you're going to be okay.
We know some of our listeners aren't college students. Yeah. They live in the area. So if they're listening to this and they go, that's great that college has something, but I'm not a student, what can they do?
Yeah, so CVAC has a 24-hour help and support line. You can call it at any time of day, any time of night, every day of the year, and you can get support on that line. There are trained advocates on the other side who can do telephone counseling, they can do crisis intervention, they can answer any questions for you, they can connect you to resources, anything around victimization, they have the answers for. And they are either our staff or our trained volunteers, and they are wonderful. They are always there for you. So at any hour of day, you can do that. And then they will connect you to our office during business hours where we have case management, free and confidential counseling, really any services that victims may need and their families as well to, get over that victimization and strive again and feel empowered.
And we are here with Haley Murphy on the Weekly Wellness Update talking about Domestic Violence Awareness Month and your organization, Crime Victims Assistance Center. If people don't necessarily feel comfortable on the phone, they're afraid that in the middle of their phone call, someone's going to come in. They actually want to visit somebody somewhere. Where can they go?
We can take you, if you want to walk right into our doors, you can do that. We will do our best to get you to see a counselor at that moment, but our support team is great too. They'll, look at the calendars, set up a counseling system for you. There's always going to be someone on staff to talk with you and, calm you down and talk about, being present and, getting over that trauma and talking about the other resources and things that you may need. Maybe it's housing, and we'll have a case manager start looking for different housing options for you. Maybe it's, clothes or getting your children to school. We can really look at every aspect of the person's life and really help them be safe and be whole.
While doing some research for this month, I do marketing for health promotion and prevention and trying to spread this message. One of the videos I kept stumbling upon on Facebook is a video where a woman is in a domestic violence situation. She calls police and starts to order a pizza. For somebody who's just outside watching that, and kind of the police officer's reaction at first is, what are you talking about? But really, that's kind of the way, or, if you want to get the message out, do something like that.
Definitely. So we do this thing it's called safety planning. And basically what we do is we go through almost every aspect of your life and make sure that no matter what's going on in that abusive situation, that you can be safe. So, going back to the pizza thing, if you were in the middle of an altercation and you feel as if it may turn violent and you pick up the phone and you're saying, hey, I need help, like 911, get the police over here, your abuser is not going to like that. They are going to be very angry. They could lash out right then for you, which puts you at a huge risk. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you pick up the phone and start ordering a pizza, they're going to say, oh, okay, pizza. They may not think anything of it. And the person on the other line, no matter what, they're going to send a police officer anyways. You know, if you call 911 and hang up, I think an officer still comes out. So it's really just giving you that access to law enforcement without putting you at risk. And that's what we do in safety planning. Another example would be, you know, maybe you're in that situation, you feel the tension rising, you feel like a violent situation could break out. We teach them that, okay, try to lead that altercation out of the kitchen where sharp objects may be. You know, we think about things that are going to keep them safe if they aren't ready to actually leave the situation and leave that abuse and leave your abusive partner.
And that's a good tip. I mean, obviously people in the heat of the situation may not have all these things, but how important is it, you know, even if you're not a victim of domestic violence, to get a safety plan and have it be second nature? So, you know, if there ever is an instance, you're kind of prepared and ready to go.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, thinking about everything, it's always safe to know, just as like a fire drill and everything else that you learned in school, you never know what's going to happen, and keeping yourself safe is so, so important for your well-being, physical, mental, emotional. You want to be able to be well and prosper in life. So thinking about little things like that, whether you're in an abusive relationship or not, you know, take that extra measure to be safe. It never hurts.
And as we have mentioned, and if you're just tuning in, there are resources on campus. We have the CARE team. Mm-hmm. We have Enough is Enough, yeah. Crime Victims Assistance Center, and you're kind of tied into all of those.
Yeah.
You know, working with the community and with the campus, how important is it that the message is heard, you know, whether you're in school, whether you're in the community, whether, you know, or, you know, somebody who may be an abuser may hear this and go, you know what, I never realized I was doing that. How important is that message?
Yeah, it's really, really important. I'm so proud of the industry that I work in and getting this message out there and spreading the facts that this unfortunate stuff happens at a greater rate than anyone really ever imagines. But because of that fact, there are ways to help, and you don't have to be in that situation. Everyone's entitled to a healthy, safe, and you know, loving relationship and loving experiences. So, you know, knowing that fact, there's nothing victims can do to ask for that to happen to them. So, you know, you have to know what you deserve and reach out if you're not getting that.
And we mentioned a little bit earlier, victims don't often seek help because they're afraid of making the situation worse.
Definitely.
So if you are in that situation, you know, I'm assuming that these services, if you call, are confidential.
Definitely. We are completely confidential. CVAC has confidentiality rights. So with any client that we work with, everything that they tell us stays explicitly with the person that they're working with, unless we have them sign a consent form. That's really the only way we can reach someone out. So we make every step, you know, we have to have that permission. On that same note, I'd like to mention that working with the students, it is confidential for me. Because of Title IX and some other education statutes, if students report an instance of interpersonal violence, you know, that everyone does everything in their realm to keep it private, but in some cases, especially because of safety, they may have to report to someone else or things may have to happen. Whereas what's a little different with my position is if you come to me, I can confidentially hear what happened to you, explain to you what's going to happen if you go to resource A, B, C on campus, which are all great, great resources. I never want to make it seem like I wouldn't want them to go there, but that can keep a lot of people from coming forward if other people are going to find out. So I can hear the story confidentially, explain what's going to happen, and if students still aren't ready to go that route, I can connect them to the resources that CVAC has that will remain completely confidential. So it's really just another option in the slew of options that, fortunately, Binghamton has.
And you mentioned sometimes that victims don't feel comfortable coming forward. And a lot of times that we hear this, and maybe it's just a stereotype, but a lot of times we hear a victim saying, oh, he really loves me. You know, he didn't mean to do that. Mm-hmm. Or, you know, she just had too much to drink and, you know, it was only a one-time thing. And, you know, yeah, it happened 5 years ago, but it's not going to happen again. How important is it that, you know, when victims feel comfortable, even if it's the first time, that they speak up, because it seems like this is a pattern. It doesn't usually happen just once.
Definitely not. And it is that pattern that makes it the abuse. In every relationship, there's going to be some sort of argument, but it's really how you deal with that argument and talk it out and kind of dispel it and put it to rest. Whereas in an abusive relationship, it's going to happen again. So when you clue onto that, you have to. And we go out and do presentations on healthy relationships for middle schoolers. And you really have to think about what you deserve and where your boundaries are, and knowing the signs of an abusive relationship, so that when it happens, you know that you don't want that. And that right in that moment, you can, before it gets too violent, before it gets down the road and you're very much caught up into it, that you can break it off then and reach out for help and learn how to keep yourself safe if that partner is going to be abusive.
And I think you touched on something important. People in relationships, whether it's friends, it's a dating relationship, it's a family relationship, people argue.
Yeah.
We're not talking about, I have a disagreement with you over what we're going to have for dinner. This is not that case.
Of course not. And again, I've mentioned it a few times, but it's that power and control. It's when they're making decisions for you and not allowing you to make decisions for yourself. And because of that, that's when violence, whether it's emotional or verbal or threats even, or coercion, that's when it's coming out. And it's happening again and again to assert control over the other person. So really, that's really what makes it abusive, compared to, if you have a fight and you talk it out and you come to an agreement or agree to disagree, but then if you argue again, it's not over the same thing, And whereas in abusive, it's going to be, there's a cycle to it, and it's going to happen over and over again.
And some of the things that people may hear on a college campus is, I don't want you going out with your friends, or if you're out with your friends, you got to check in with me. I want to know what you're doing at all times. Mm-hmm. People may go, oh, they just care about me, but it's not that case. If it gets to that point, and that's kind of, I think, what you're talking about when, it's that power thing,
Mm-hmm.
You can't go out with your friends. You can't go hang out with this person, or you're in a study group and I'm going to come because I don't trust what you're doing. Those are all little things that, people may not think of as a domestic violence type situation, but it seems to me that those little things tend to build if you let them stay as they are.
Definitely. There's a power and control wheel that you can find online, and it really goes through the different aspects of tactics that abusers will use in a domestic violence relationship. And all of them can start at a very low level. For example, one of them is isolation. So maybe, you and your best friend would spend every moment together, but then you get in this relationship and you're not seeing them all the time. And maybe your new partner is the one who's kind of, cutting that off a little bit. And that seems, low key at first. Everyone spends a lot of time with the person they just start dating. That's normal. But then is that going to happen again and again? And then that support system is cut off because your new partner has isolated you so much from that. And it's things like that just keep growing and resulting in abuse.
We're running out of time. We just have a couple quick minutes left. So just to reinforce services on campus, if somebody is going through this, or if they think they're going through this and need somebody to talk to, how do they get a hold of you?
So you can email me. Go on our website is www.cvac.us. That's going to talk about all of our resources on there. Enough is Enough is one of them, and my email address is right on there. So feel free to shoot me an email. I can always be reachable by that, or call our agency. On campus specifically, the whole care team knows how to get in touch with me, specifically Doris Chung in IVP. She's in the Dean of Students office. You can give them a call, and they will be happy to point you in the right direction of whatever you need. The counseling UCC here is great as well. They are also know how to get a hold of me. And I'm trying to reach everyone on campus, so I hope that everyone knows how to get a hold of me. And I want everyone who's listening to this to reach out if you need help, because I will, I'll help you out.
Thank you so much for joining us this week. It's Haley Murphy of the Crime Victims Assistance Center and Enough is Enough. And I think it's really important that in this Domestic Violence Awareness Month that we really do shine a light on what's going on behind closed doors. And I really must commend a lot of the pro sports teams, as Haley and I talked about. The pro sports leagues are starting to shine a light on this. And it's not just, the macho athletes, and it really is a problem, and we're starting to see that more and more, and we're starting to speak up. And I think that by speaking up, we're really raising that awareness, and the more we can raise the awareness, I think the more that we're going to cut down on